going to be times during the course of a football season, during the course of a football game, where there could be conflicting calls out on the field, conflicting interpretations of a penalty enforcement. How do you, as the assigned leader, the referee, the crew chief, how do you handle those situations? Well, 90% of the time, when there's two officials who have opposing calls, they'll resolve the situation themselves. And by the time you talk to them, they'll tell you what the two different calls were, what they've resolved, and then it's just your job to make the announcement and move forward with that. If more and more games are being, even at the high school level, referees have microphones, this is a great time for you to use that microphone as your advantage. And if you've had one official who's called a block in the back, another official who's taken them off the call, use that microphone to your advantage. Everybody in that stadium, the coaches, the fans, the players, they've seen a flag down. Take the opportunity to make that announcement that there's no foul on the play. The block in question was legal. And remember, a little semantics there about penalty announcement. It was a flag, so don't announce there was no flag on the play. Those that want to criticize, you'll say, well, sure there was. We saw it on the ground. So remember, there was no foul on the play. The block in question was legal. But don't leave the coaches, the players, and the fans in the dark when you have the ability to communicate and use that microphone. Use it as your friend. Use it as a positive tool. But you've got the situations that come up sometimes when you get down to those two officials, and this official says, I've got a flag for a block in the back. This official says it's a side block. You haven't even seen the foul in question or the call in question. How do you resolve that? And human dynamics can play into this. Will they perceive that you solved the problem because you've been a longtime friend with this one official who wants them to pick it up? Or your son and their daughter go to school together, you attend the same church. You don't want the people on your crew to think that you solved the problem based on personal influences. You want to solve that problem simply on how they report it to you. Whose primary call is it? How sure are they of the call? I kind of refer to it as I look for chinks in the armor. And this is something in our first pregame of the season that I cover with the crew. I tell them that if we have a conflict resolution situation, I'm going to go to those officials. I'm going to ask them what they saw. I expect that official to tell me exactly, in his words and his thoughts, what he saw. Then I'll ask the other official, why do you want him to pick the flag up? And I'll ask them to describe what they saw. What I'm listening for is, does an official confidently tell me that I saw hands in the back, solidly pushed him in the back, he ended up on his face? Or does the official say, I think, I thought, maybe, could be? Those are what I say are chinks in the armor. And I tell the officials, if you've got a chink in the armor, let it come out. Don't be stubborn and try and convince somebody that you've got this call solid when in the back of your mind you really have doubt. So if you have doubt, let that come out in the conversation, because our job is to try and get it right. Now this official's trying to get you to pick the flag up, and he's confident about the hands being on the side. The approach wasn't from behind or in chase mode. It's a side block. Now we can get the situation resolved and we can pick the flag up. But if we get stubborn, all stubbornness is going to do is interfere with that. So if you have what I deem a chink in the armor, let it come out in the conversation. We're trying to get it right. I want to be there to help you, you be there to help me. So think about how you want to do conflict resolution on the crew that you work with, and then share that with the crew and get feedback from them on how they want to resolve situations or how they think things should be done. But solve that before in a pregame. Don't try and have it for the first time be solved out on a football field. The other thing is, let's talk a little bit about consistency, about individual consistency, about crew consistency, and then if you work within a conference, whether it's high school or college, how do you get conference consistency? What I first will go back to is this. I'm going to pose a question to you. Are you consistent in your holding calls? Are you consistent in your pass interference calls? I would expect, whether you're a first-year official, whether you're a third-year official, there's probably, and there should be, a little degree of confidence that says, I think I'm pretty consistent in those calls. I could always get better, but I think I'm pretty consistent on how I call holding or how I call pass interference. All right, that's good. Now we've got a whole room full of officials, and I pick 5 different officials to come together to work this game tomorrow. You've never worked together before, but everybody says they're consistent on how they call the game. Will those 5 officials be able to mold together and show crew consistency so that holding gets called this way on this side of the field and it gets called the same way on this side of the field? It's important for the coaches and the players to have the ability to predict this a little bit and understand how the game's going to be called. If holding gets called real tight over here, and over here you can just about draw blood before a holding call happens, or the same with pass interference, the field starts to tip. When the field starts to tip, they feel things are out of balance. And we've all heard the coaches who scream at us and say, you need to be consistent. And what they're really saying is they're really not as much talking about you as they are about the game in front of them, the crew today, that the field seems to be tipping one way or the other, that you guys aren't on the same page on how you're calling the game. But again, I go back to the premise that says coaches and players have a right to predict how this game is going to be called today. And how we work on our crew consistency. And we're going to make mistakes, so don't equate a mistake with consistency. Mistakes happen. But how are we consistently calling holding? How are we consistently calling pass interference, blocks in the back, so that the players and the coaches have an opportunity to play the game and understand how it's being called today? They will adjust to that, but they need to know where the bar's been set. So work on that within your crews. You know yourself. You see your games. You're out on the field with other officials. You know how the people out on the field call the game. Have that crew work together to bring cohesiveness in there on that crew consistency. Then the next step is whoever your supervisor, your coordinators are, your assigners, your local association, they should be talking philosophies on calls, trying to bring the association or the conference into alignment on how the game gets called week to week. So again, individual consistency, crew consistency, and then your conference consistency. Real important, because the game belongs to those players and coaches. They have a right to know how we're going to call it. Another area I think that's important for us to look at, and for individual leadership, crew leadership, are the reasons that individuals or crews make mistakes. The first thing is, I think it usually boils down to us not being mechanically sound. Are we just getting out of sync, and we're not in the right place at the right time? We're not taking care of our responsibilities. And remember when we talked about looking at film and figuring out why it worked and why it didn't work, I think we need to go back at these things and say the same thing. It probably is broken down mechanically. So we need, those are, and reality is those are easy things to fix. If it's just a mechanical problem, we can fix those things very easily. Are we misapplying a rule? Okay? If we're misapplying a rule, again, hate to see that happen. We're responsible for knowing about the rules. But at the same time, we can fix that. That's real easy to do. Is it about poor communication? Are we just not giving? Sometimes we have errors in penalty enforcement, and it was a communication problem. The wrong thing was said or was misunderstood. It wasn't repeated back. The communication to a sideline wasn't good. So we didn't get the opportunity to correct it because we didn't have sound communication between the crew. And we talk about these things all the time. We talk about mechanics in a pregame. We talk about rules in a pregame. We talk about communication in a pregame. But then here's what really happens. We go out on a football field and we get complacent. And I think complacency leads to us having more mistakes than anything else. When we get complacent and we go through the motions of something and we really don't do what we talked about. Example be the penalty enforcement. We've talked about how the official will come in and give A, B, C, D to the referee. The who, what, when, where, why, the result of the play, who fouled, etc. But then when it actually comes time and a foul's been called, we're content just to come in and say, I got holding on the offense. And we say nothing about the status of the ball. We say nothing about where the foul occurred or what the penalty enforcement is. And the referee just accepts that. Even though he said he was going to demand more of you, he accepts that. And then in the middle of his announcement,
he's not sure what down it was. He's not sure when he's finished with his announcement, what is he doing with this clock? Was it an incomplete pass? Was it a completed pass? So all of a sudden, all the things we talked about on penalty enforcement, we're not really doing. We've gone through the motions, but haven't done them. The same thing happens when we take and we have a runner who's going to the ground. We know, we've heard it 1,000 times at officiating clinics and association meetings. You call the runner down when you see him in possession of the football. And I'll bet you that if we really analyzed when we're blowing a whistle or putting our hand up to signify the end of a play or the next down, I'll bet you if we really stop and think about it, we've blown that whistle a hair too early. Now 99.9% of the time, the runner's down on the ground with the ball, and we've been lucky. We've gotten away with it. But that one time when he goes to the ground, we toot the whistle, and the ball's out now from the other side, and we're wondering, was I too early with the whistle? Was he down? It's that complacency mistake that we've been doing for weeks, seasons, maybe years, that's finally come back and haunted us today. So the mistake didn't start today with an inadvertent whistle for a fumble and we've ruled him down. The mistake really started seasons ago. Eliminate the complacency mistakes, and you're going to have better individual and crew success. And recognize, and when you realize you've got a complacency mistake, share it with the crew. One, they'll relate to it because they're probably doing some of the same things themselves. And number two, they'll respect you for you stepping up and being a leader in that area.
Earlier we talked about commitment, and I think it's something we need to look at from the thing about what is your individual or crew commitment to the football season. 30-some years ago when I started officiating football, I was doing football, basketball, baseball. You pretty much jumped from one sport to the next, and you really weren't concerned about the next season coming up until it was right on top of you. Now with the specialization there is and the emphasis in all the sports, we're pretty much now working on football year-round. So let's take a look about what's happened from last season to this season and all the year-round preparation that goes into a successful year. Sometimes you have changes in your crew. You know, if there's been a change in your crew, you've got two things to consider. The people that have just left your crew, whether it's been retirements or they've moved on to another crew or to a different conference, or whether you have the new people coming in. We always make a point that we're going to pick the phone up, we're going to thank the guys that used to be with us and have moved on. Like I say, they could have moved on to a different crew. Maybe they've moved to a different conference. Maybe they've moved from a different level of officiating, from the high school to the college to the pros. But we want to take and thank them. It's just a small thing, but thank them for being with the crew and the contributions they made, and encourage the other people on the crew to do the same thing. That means a lot to somebody who's left the crew. So again, whether it's a retirement, whether they've moved on to a different crew, but make sure you take that minute to give them a little thank you for what they've done for the crew. Now you've got the new guys coming in, and you want to welcome them to the crew and make them feel as much a part of the crew as they can right off the bat. They're the ones that are going to be nervous. They want to come in there and make a good impression on all the other guys. Try and just, as you welcome them in, just say, hey, this first year, all I'm looking for you to do is just blend in with the crew and have the most successful year you can. Don't worry about putting extra burdens on them or other responsibilities, but just welcome them and try and get them to fit in the best you can. But take those opportunities for the new guys or the guys leaving to make sure that you do that type of a thank you or a welcome. Now, another thing that's occurred over the years is video study. It was unheard of years ago that we'd get video back on our high school games, our small college games. And we had to take the initiative back in the era of VHS tape to leave tapes with the schools, hope they could make a copy and get it back to us. Now in the era of everything being digitized, things going up on the web, you've got the opportunity that you can probably get access during the season or after the season to the games you worked. Take that opportunity in the off season to go through those films, share them with your crew, have the other people on your crew look at them, and go through those things. And take and have those list of plays that you want to review that you really feel were done outstanding. It was excellent officiating, so that you can re-emphasize that and you can get the crew to try and emulate that again. And then, of course, you've got the plays that you want to look at, and they always don't have to be with, was it a correct call for pass interference or not? There might have been no call on the play, but it was an example of mechanics, maybe a mechanic breakdown. It didn't result in a poor call, but it was a mechanic breakdown that you want to take and emphasize so that it doesn't happen again. So take those opportunities in the off season. You don't have to do it every day, every week, but take some time in the off season where you individually or you get your crew together and do a little video study in the off season. Rule study is also important. Again, I can remember when prior to the start of the season, if it was high school ball, we took a 100-question test with